Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. We're going to continue reading the book al-Ajubah al-Jaliya fi al-Ahkam al-Hanbaliya, or the clear ruling in Hanbali Rulings by Shaykh Musa bin Issa al-Qaddoomi rahimahullah. This is lesson 39 and it will be the second part of the book of fasting. So let us begin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. قال المؤلف رحمه الله نفع الله به وبعلومه وعلوم مشايخنا في الدارين آمين. So we're on page 111 of our book, the translation by Sheikh Khalid Shah. Let's quickly look at Sharh of Daleel for a few additional things that aren't mentioned here in al-Ajubah. So we'll talk about the pillar of the fasting. So we've covered this before, but we didn't maybe specify it as far as being a rukn, but in our definition of fasting I think it's covered. But just to reiterate here, what is the fard of this fasting? And this relates to both the obligatory fast and the supererogatory fast. It is restraining or refraining from all of the things that break the fast from the rising of the sun, or the fajr, a-thani, the second fajr. This is referring to the true fajr, or the fajr that we would know by the second adhan, until the complete setting of the sun, meaning the adhan of the Maghrib prayer. And the a-Taghlabi just clarifies, there are the two fajr prayers and adhans, and the first adhan is more of one to wake someone up, whereas the second adhan of the fajr is actually announcing the actual entering of the time of the fajr. So even after the first, the so-called first fajr, or the first adhan of the fajr, one may still do these things that break the fast until the time of the second fajr. Between these two fajrs or adhans of the fajr, it won't harm you to do any of the things that break the fast, which we will detail shortly. So there are certain sunnahs relating to the fasting, and in Daleel a-Talib, Imam Mar'i al-Karmi rahimahullah, he mentions 6. The first being hurrying to break the fast, and this should be done when there is a high level of certainty that the sun has set, and it is superior that one break the fast before the Maghrib prayer. Breaking the fast just essentially means to eat or drink something. Doesn't mean that one takes like a full meal, as you may see in some countries or cultures. And the next is delaying the suhoor. So suhoor is referring to the late night or early morning meal, depends how you look at it, but either way it's just the last meal that you eat before the fasting. And this can be done up to the second fajr, but if you're delaying it that late, you should be delaying it to the point where you don't fear that the sun is going to rise, i.e. the second Fajr, the true Fajr is coming in. And this suhoor meal itself is a sunnah. So both taking the suhoor is a sunnah and delaying it. Meaning, for example, if your Fajr is like at 4 a.m., theoretically you can eat it, the suhoor meal, at midnight or 1 o'clock, but it's better to delay it to like 3 or 3:30, for example. And the third sunnah is increasing and performing good deeds, such as reading the Quran more, doing more dhikr, paying more sadaqah, more charity, holding one's tongue from what is disliked. And that's just what is disliked. As far as what is haram, it is obligatory that one refrain from those haram things, such as lying, talking behind people's backs, gossiping, and gossiping includes also telling things that are not false, insulting or abusing others verbally, saying offensive and reprehensible things, and other than that. And this is by scholarly consensus that it is obligatory for one to refrain from these haram things. And it's also a sunnah that if one is to insult you, verbally abuse you while fasting, that you say, "Inni sa'im," I'm fasting. And one should just say this out loud. There is some discussion in the madhab whether it's superior that it be said out loud or silently, kind of like to oneself, but out loud is inshallah the more correct position. And the Taghlabi says that's what's apparent in the mutun, the core texts such as al-Muntaha, and that's what Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah chose, and also his grandfather, the author of al-Muharrar. So this is inshallah the more correct opinion. And then the fifth sunnah that he mentions here is that one should read supplication, meaning the one who's fasting, upon breaking his fast. And what the Taghlabi mentions here is the dua, Allahumma allaka sumtu wa ala rizqaka aftartu subhanaka wa bihamdik Allahumma taqabbal minni innaka anta samiul alim. And there are other supplications that one can read as well. And our sheikhs have clarified that this is something that one should read after breaking the fast, meaning that some people are kind of delaying breaking their fast because they're reading different supplications. Rather, one should break the fast. To break the fast, as we've already mentioned, it is a sunnah to hurry in breaking the fast. Then once the fast is broken, you can read the dua, the supplication. And with regards to breaking the fast, it's also recommended that one breaks the fast of someone else who is fasting. There's a great reward in that. And just going back to the supplication, there's the supplication that was mentioned here. As I said, if you have the books of supplications, there's also other supplications that one should read, but we should try to read the supplication because the dua at the time of breaking the fast is more likely to be answered, and Allah knows best. And finally, the last sunnah, number 6, is to break one's fast with a moist date. or like fresh date, and if that is not available, then one may use a dry date, and if that's not available, one may use water. So now let's go back to our book. This is page 111. The author, rahimahullah, says 87. It is allowed, or is it allowed, for anyone not to fast in Ramadan? And he replies, it is permissible for a pregnant or breastfeeding woman if they both fear for their own lives not to fast. They merely have to make qada, meaning the makeup, later on. If they both fear for the child, then they can also break the fast and make qada or makeup later on. Also, in this case, the guardian of the child, in parentheses usually the father, must feed a poor person a mud of wheat every day. It is permitted for an elderly person not to fast. It is sunnah for a sick person or traveler not to fast. An elderly person incapable of fasting must feed a poor person for each day missed. The sick person and traveler can make up the fast without feeding the poor. So now we can again look at Sharh of Daleel for some additional details. So he just re-emphasizes that it is haram for the one who doesn't have an excuse not to fast, which is mainly the sick person or the one traveling, to break his fast in Ramadan. However, there are some different rules. So for example, the menstruating woman or the woman with postpartum bleeding must break the fast. It is obligatory for them to break the fast. Now, with regard to the one who is traveling, if one is traveling a distance where it becomes permissible for him to shorten the prayers, so this is the 16 farsakh, and you can go back to that lesson about combining and shortening the prayers if you need more details on that. But for the person who it's permissible for them to shorten the prayers, it is sunnah for them to break their fast. But this should be done when one goes beyond the built or constructed houses of their village or town. As we said, it is sunnah for this traveler to break his fast. So if he were to choose to fast, it would actually then be disliked, and that dislike would remain even if he did not face any difficulty. And if one were to if one were to travel in order to break his fast, then this would be impermissible. It will be, in fact, haram to travel for that purpose. As for the person who is sick and fears some harm for himself, it is also sunnah for him to break his fast. Harm for himself would mean that his sickness would get worse or its duration would get longer. However, if the sick person chooses to fast, his fast would be valid and count. But maybe we need to define the sick person. So the sick person who would not experience any harm by fasting does not break his fast. So this type of so-called sickness will be something like maybe having a sore tooth or sore finger or something like that. And Al-Imam Ahmed was asked about when does the sick person break his fast, and he said if he's unable to do it, so it was said to him like the fever, like someone who has a fever, and he said any sickness that is more severe than a fever. So that's not the perfect, I shouldn't say perfect, but the most precise way to measure or define sickness, but at least we can get some kind of idea about things that would and would not be included. And yes, there could be some gray area there. So it's always better to go to the side of caution. I think the point is that, as the a-Taghlabi said, one should not experience any type of harm, meaning a significant harm, because of the fasting, and Allah knows best. And then there's also this issue regarding the one who is a resident and then begins to travel during the day. So for this person, it would be permissible for him to break his fast, assuming that the travel is a permissible travel and it is going to the distance where one can be considered a traveler. And as we said, he would not break the fast until he goes beyond the limits of his town or village, as we've described, the built buildings. And for this type of traveler, it is better for him to complete his fast for that day. And I think why this is probably mentioned here, because there are other positions, I believe according to the Shafi'is, that a condition of the traveler breaking the fast is that he or she departs before the Fajr, but this is not the case in our madhab. But as we said, it would be superior for the traveler who departs in the daytime to break his fast, not break his fast, to continue and complete his fast, and Allah knows best. So another category of people who it would be permissible for them to break the fast would be the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman. This is when they either fear for themselves, meaning their own health, or for their child. And if they have this type of fear of harm, it would be disliked for them to fast. Now, regarding the pregnant and breastfeeding woman, if she breaks her fast out of fear for her child, meaning only her child, not herself as well, then she has to make up the day that she didn't fast, and it is obligatory upon the wali of the child, the guardian, which would normally be the father, to feed one poor person every day. Whereas if she, meaning the pregnant or breastfeeding woman, broke her fast out of fear for herself only, meaning not her child as well, then she would only have to make up the days. There would be no feeding of poor people in addition to that. Now, there's also the case of the people who start a day where fasting is obligatory, being of the excused category, whether that's actual an excuse, being excused by their own choice, or actually it not being permissible for them to fast. If their status changes, then they will have to observe fasting the rest of the day and make up that day. So an example of this would be if a non-Muslim became a Muslim. So he started the day out with no obligation to fast, and then during that day the obligation to fast started. He will fast that day, then later make it up. Another example would be the menstruating woman whose menstruation ends, or the person who is sick and recovers from his sickness, or the person who is traveling and then ceases to be a traveler. Basically, they have reached their destination, or some other way have become a resident. Or if a child has become an adult, not adult in what we might say legal terms, but within the Sharia and what is obligatory for them in the Sharia. Or if an insane, mentally ill person then regained their senses, then all such types of these categories of people would then observe the fasting and make up the day later on. Now we'll continue in the book, The Nullifiers of Fasts, 88. What nullifies the fast? The author replies, 12 things nullify a fast. They are: A. Menses or menstruation. B. Nifas or postpartum bleeding. C. Death. D. Becoming murtad or an apostate with Allah Ta'ala. We seek refuge from that. E. Determining to break the fast. F. Wavering in breaking it. G. Vomiting intentionally. H. Inserting something into the anus. I. Swallowing phlegm after it is out of the mouth. J. Bleeding by cupping, specifically for both the cupper and the cupped. K. Ejaculating from repeated looking. And at this part of the dars, I'll just say, in case younger people are attending or maybe listening in the background, we may be talking about a few issues that may not be fully appropriate for younger people, though we will discuss them in a dignified way. So going back to K, ejaculating from repeated looking, but not by thinking or a wet dream. Also, the fast is broken from the exiting of semen or madi due to kissing, touching, masturbation, or lovemaking without intercourse. L. Anything that reaches the internal cavity of the torso, food or air pipe via the mouth, the brain, inside the ears, eyes, and nose. And these descriptions are in parentheses here, they're not in the main text. Whether it be liquid or anything else, nourishing or otherwise, meaning non-nourishing. All the above 12 must be intentional, not forgetful or forced, except for intercourse by the male, because that can't be by force. So I think several of these are quite clear. The exiting of blood from menstruation or postpartum bleeding, death, apostasy, seek refuge from Allah from that. Of course, one having the determination, meaning the intention to break the fast, this would then break the fast. And I mean, just to be clear, it's not then a condition that one actually does something to break the fast, but the intention to break the fast itself breaks the fast. Then the next one, wavering in it, meaning to break the fast. So if one's kind of considering, yes, do it, don't do it, I mean, that is something, it's like the determination itself. Then the next one, vomiting intentionally, and this is just a note, if some of you are also reading along with Sharh of Daleel for Daleel a-Talib with me, the popular version, that is the authentication by Sheikh al-Ashqar, I've noticed that there seems to be an error in this point in the text. The metin text of Daleel a-Talib does not seem to be correct here. It says la in dar'a, so it should say al-qay amdan, so vomiting intentionally. That's just a note in case you're reading along with that version of Sharh of Daleel. And then the next one, putting something into the anus because it reaches the jawf. So this is actually maybe a good time to introduce this principle of the jawf, because as I said, I think in the last video, there's this idea that fasting is mainly eating or drinking, which, I mean, that maybe when we're fasting, these are the main things we're thinking about, that we're refraining from. But what is generally actually breaking the fast is something entering the cavity of the body. So in this case, they're talking about the anus, but that's why, for example, eating or drinking would also invalidate the fast. But when we think about the body, there are some things to consider, like, for example, the inside of the mouth would still be considered part of kind of the external cavity. That's why if you were to put like a siwak to clean your teeth or something like that in the mouth, that wouldn't break its fast. And then we will get to another point which will also maybe help clarify this, inshallah. Basically the next point, which is swallowing phlegm, like the mucus, after it's out of the mouth. Next, the act of cupping blood, and this would apply to both the one who is cupping and the one who's being cupped. This is something that has been mentioned in the hadith. However, this is from the mufradat, or the lone positions of the Hanbali madhab. So I'm assuming that probably other madhab are considering that as an abrogated hadith, or for some other reason they're not accepting it. But there is a hadith evidence to support this, as what our Sheikh Dr. Mustafa Ulian Hafidhahullah has mentioned. So now the 10th invalidator would be the exiting of semen, i.e. ejaculation, from repetitive looking at something that would make someone feel that type of desire. This is because one is doing the repetitive looking, and it's like he's making himself desirous. This would be as opposed to someone who were to ejaculate due to a single looking, because they wouldn't necessarily be held accountable to that, because single looking could be excusable, and it's not something that would generally be done here for that purpose of enjoyment. I mean, we can assume that it's not being done for enjoyment. If it was being done for enjoyment, I think that would fall under breaking the fast. But to be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. But as I said, the single look here is just something that could be by chance. It's not done with that intention as the repetitive looking. One keeps looking back because something is desirous. And nor would thinking about something, even if that was maybe a haram thing, but if one were to ejaculate from thinking about something, this would not break the fast because it's not an actual looking, nor is it anything that involves physical touching, and it resembles the wet dream. So likewise, then we can understand that the wet dream does not break the fast. Now, if madhi is exiting the pre-ejaculation fluid, even from multiple lookings, this would not break the fast. Now we're here talking just about madhi coming out from looking. So a single look or multiple looks will not break the fast. However, if it is coming out, or semen, from something physical like touching or kissing, then this would break the fast. And other things would be included here, such as if semen or madhi were to exit from masturbation, or a type of more intense touching, this would also be from the invalidators of fasting. And then the last invalidator, what we mentioned, what is reaching the body cavity or the throat or the dimagh. Usually they translate it like brain, but we can maybe say the inner head. From something, it could be liquid or otherwise, and also it doesn't matter if it is something that is giving nutrition or not. I mean, there's always this kind of question coming about, like, oh, if someone needs an injection during Ramadan, but this isn't, a nutrient supplement. It's not something like that. For example, like an antibiotic. Anything that is entering the inner cavity of the body will break the fast. And that's why a-Taghlabi, he just gives more examples of things like a stone. If you eat a stone, there's no nutrition in it, but that will break your fast. A piece of metal, where you think about like swallowing a piece of metal, or like the needle, like if you even just putting a needle in you, without even injecting something, that's going to break your fast. Of course, we're talking about things that are done intentionally, not, for example, accidentally. Also, if you are putting things on the outside of your body, especially in places where there's some kind of like a gland where it may get into your body, and then it is reaching the inside of your body so much that you can observe it through another sense, like taste. So like the famous example that they give in a lot of the books is if you put on like a kuhl. Kuhl is like that kind of, it basically looks like a black eyeliner. If you were to put this on your eye, and then in your throat you start tasting it, this means it has entered the jawf, the cavity of the body. You've broken the fast. Likewise, if you're chewing something I think for a contemporary understanding, we could say something like gum, it's like a flavored gum. And the flavor is then reaching your throat, also you've broken your fast. And then finally, or if saliva has reached to your lips, I think this is maybe the more correct way to say it. I think I was saying teeth, but yes, I think lips will be the more correct way to define it. And even if one is kind of like, collecting saliva in his mouth and swallows it, as long as it's not reaching the lips, then this would not break the fast. Now, as I maybe mentioned just a little bit earlier, we're talking about all these things being done intentionally. However, if these things were done out of forgetfulness, or someone was forcing you to do it, then it would be something that is excused. And there would be, for example, the fasting wouldn't be invalidated, and then whatever follows that, such as having to make it up or pay some kind of expiation, none of that would have to follow. So the person who does one of the things that breaks the fast out of forgetfulness, or who is forced to do so, does not have their fast broken. Likewise, were something to enter your throat kind of without your control, such as dust, such as a fly. This is done without your intention to put it in your throat, and this would also not break the fast. And we mentioned the case of one who's kind of collecting saliva in their mouth. As long as it doesn't exceed the lips, it would not break the fast, although this is something that would be disliked to do. This is the end of this lesson. Inshallah, we'll finish the book of fasting in the next lesson, talking about making up fasts and the case where you will have to pay expiation. And inshallah, we'll also add what I think could be an additional section. I'm not sure if it's included in the book that we're reading, but we'll talk about the i'tikaf, or the spiritual retreat during Ramadan. As usual, please don't forget this in your dua. Please don't forget our scholars, those of this world and the next, who are the ones who have the prophetic inheritance and are guiding us the right way. And don't forget about our Muslim brothers and sisters, especially those who are facing different trials and tribulations. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een.